In your opinion, which movies are overrated? Although I have to agree with this, since I feel like it's such a cringy movie, I think the movie targets teenagers as their viewers since it's more relatable at that stage of their lives. Just my observation, as I see lots of teenagers on my feed getting giddy over it when the trailer's released. That's what I also think of To All the Boys I've Loved. It's one of those movies where you just watch one day and you think to yourself, did I really like this back then, lol. So many awkward pauses. I don't like Big Bang Theory, but to be fair, it is time to allow for the laugh track / audience / whatever. Of course, if you take out something that is supposed to be in there, it's going to be weird. Yeah, the Archduke was not the most popular member of the royal family, and his wife was openly loathed at court. She was seen as so far beneath the royal family that the marriage was morganatic. Their kids could not inherit the throne. Hell, most of the world's leaders buggered off on holiday at the beginning of July, which shows the level of concern surrounding the crisis by Europe's leaders. Basically, the plot is that you have someone trying to figure out what happened, and as he is doing his work he comes to discover that they all but encouraged it so that war could begin. I'd say 7/10. Seems a little low budget, but overall not a bad movie for a Thursday afternoon. There are so many. I'm surprised the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. never gets mentioned. Quote from Wikipedia. In 1979, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, released a report stating that there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of King. In 1999, a mixed-race jury at a Memphis civil suit reached a unanimous verdict that King was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy involving the U.S. government, a person named Raoul, among others. There is abundant evidence, Coretta King said after the verdict, of a major, high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband. The jury found the mafia and various local, state, and federal government agencies were deeply involved in the assassination. Mr. Ray was set up to take the blame. No, someone did a YouTube video and people took it as truth. It's actually bullshit, and the result of misunderstanding customer demand and engineering. You would never buy a second one of the lights that last forever. They're shitty light and stupidly inefficient. Really, they're a heater that happens to glow a little bit. Not to mention, they're more expensive than other lights that provide far better light at a fraction of the energy. It is definitely one of the most believed. It's bullshit, but it is definitely believed. The light bulbs made that last forever were absolute shit. They were dim and inefficient, even compared to other incandescent lights. This is one of the things that drives me nuts, because there are perfectly reasonable engineering explanations for every turn. But corporations are bad, so it's easier to believe that they would do something staggeringly stupid and self-defeating just to screw the consumer rather than believe that they made reasonable choices based on performance criteria and attempted standardization, with all the benefits that brings to everyone. Making shit bulbs on purpose would mean the second the cartel broke up, there would have been an immediate and drastic increase in life as each company tried to outdo their competition. That didn't happen. That alone should tell you this is a bullshit conspiracy, but it's far from the only whole. It's like people think that those masterminding these type of conspiracies are both incredibly smart and capable to pull it off while too stupid to realize they're shooting themselves in the foot. In 1933, 4 weeks after Adolf Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany, the German Reichstag was set on fire by a Dutch communist named Baroness van der Lubbe, who was caught nearby the building soon after it erupted in flames. He had several fire-starting items on him, so authorities took him in. Within hours, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party seized this opportunity to violently and viciously denounce communists within the German government, and Hindenburg invoked Article 48 to abolish freedom of speech. assembly, and the press, as well as authorizing government use of wiretapping. Basically, Hitler used this as a means of abolishing civil liberties within Germany, as well as rounding up and persecuting communist political opponents. Basically, with the communist seats in German government uprooted, the Nazis were free to do what they wanted, and this is viewed as a pivotal moment in the creation of the totalitarian Nazi German state. Since Hitler now had legal emergency powers to do whatever he wanted, the conspiracy comes in the fact that some evidence shows that this event was organized and orchestrated by a secret team of Nazi brown shirts who entered the Reichstag through a secret tunnel, set the building on fire, and blamed van der Lubbe. Furthermore, during the Nuremberg trials, it came out that Hermann Göring allegedly claimed to have set fire to the building himself while drunk at a birthday celebration. Honestly, this is the most convincing conspiracy theory I've ever heard because it just makes the most sense. You're telling me the perfect opportunity to seize absolute control of the government and the people just happens to fall into Hitler's lap 4 weeks after he's elected as chancellor? This type of evil Machiavellian shit was right up the Nazis' alley. Marinus was mostly blind and was intellectually disabled. He was standing in front of the burning building dazzled by the bright fire when he was arrested. The people around him thought he stood out. I just quickly googled him and I didn't see information about it. But the reason he had heavily impaired vision is because he had lime dumped in his eyes by his co-workers who bullied him while he was working as a bricklayer in the 20s. Really sad. He couldn't find other work because of his low IQ and got treated poorly in the only job he could do. I know someone who knew his cousin before the war, from what I was told. Ops theory is correct. You can hate the idea of conspiracies when applied and that they all have to be true canon way while still not accepting everything that has been purported by the government. Like if you deny conspiracy theories like MKUltra, Tuskegee, Operation Sea Spray, Contra, or COINTELPRO, then you are simply denying reality. Honestly, it's fairly believable that he did, and the guards just looked the other way and let him. He certainly could also have been murdered, but I find it funny how people like to blame the murder on whichever political party they disagree with, like he didn't have plenty of friends on both sides. Good evening 47. Your target is Jeffrey Epstein, billionaire financier. He is currently in federal custody awaiting trial on various charges including sex trafficking. Mr. Epstein is associated with some very powerful people who would rather not have their names appear in the news. Your mission is twofold. Deal with Mr. Epstein in whatever way you see fit and grab his little black book on your way out. I shall leave you to prepare. The Korean fan death conspiracy, a great thing to Google for those of you that like random information. So for some reason for like 60+ years some people in Korea believed running a fan in a closed room can be fatal. A conspiracy theory came out that the Korean government actually tried to put legitimacy behind this myth of fan death, just to lower the amount of energy consumption in homes. Considering how prevalent propaganda by governments were in the early and mid-1900s, I totally believe it. I think this is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. At the same time, the ideological extremes presented in some media, and the proliferation of those ideas on the internet and particularly on social media via algorithmically served content, is creating a genuine divide in society via alternate realities, understanding of facts. When my husband and I first were dating, I had him convinced I didn't really believe Switzerland was a place. My whole argument was I've never met anyone from there, so clearly it doesn't exist. I was just drunk and thought I was being funny. Joke's on me because he's Italian in the province where his family lives is near enough to the Swiss border that it's just a day trip over. I've always liked how George Bush Sr., future director of the CIA, was in Dallas the day JFK was shot. Years later, when asked about what he was doing there, he said he didn't remember, making him maybe the only person in the world who doesn't remember exactly where they were and what they were doing when they heard the president was assassinated. Lol. I've been watching videos on this all week and was scrolling to see if I had to comment it. It's insane to me how little traction this theory gets. The detective who makes the argument has a ton of evidence, a great reputation, and makes very valid points, and the video legit has like 250k views on YouTube. That's it. Tons of reasons. Jason was 24, well-built, had love-hate relationship with Nicole, was taking meds for rage and was known to black out in rage. He stopped taking the meds several months before the murders. He had been charged with assault with a knife to a former boss. He had knives on hand always, as he was a chef who carried his knives. I should note that one of the main defense attorneys in the case say the prosecution lost because they were adamant there was only one knife when he thought evidence showed two. Jason wore knit caps and OJ never did. The knit cap at the murder was black and had a black male's hair and the hair of a short dog. Jason had a short-haired dog. OJ had no dog. There were pictures of Jason with that black knit cap before the murder, but pictures after the murder never show it again. For years he would go and take off his Jeep's roof during rainstorms and only reinstall it after the rain was over, presumably to wash away evidence. The theory doesn't suggest OJ was not there, but rather that Jason killed the two and called OJ after he realized what he had done. That would explain why OJ had relatively minimal blood in the Bronco, otherwise it would have been a mess. OJ took the fall because it was his son, but also because he was then also associated with the murder, at least as an accessory. Also look at Jason the moment OJ was acquired. Everyone is cheering and Jason looks pissed as if he feels bad for killing his stepmother. Yes, OJ hired a lawyer for Jason before he had ever hired one for himself. Also, Jason was never questioned in the initial investigation, and when he eventually was, he became incredibly nervous to the point they had to take a break and they came back and didn't resume the questioning. Lots of stuff I missed I just typed out by memory. Things like a knife also being in the storage locker that the detective was able to get a hold of that belonged to Jason. That knife had a butt on it that would be consistent with the tear on Nicole's head, so it seems he bugged her head with that specific knife. He also claimed to have been cooking for 200 people at work on the night of the murder, but the restaurant only housed 80 or so guests and was incredibly slow that specific day of the week, I believe Sunday, so Jason would often leave early. He clocked out by handwritten time that evening, even though the automatic time clock machine was functioning. Like so much evidence, lol, but the only conspiracies people take interest in are the less substantiated ones, I guess. What convinced me that JFK was a conspiracy was the amount of evidence that people heard more than 3 shots. The loss of films people claimed showed multiple gunshots from other angles, audio analysis indicating more gunfire, Oswald's possible status as a CIA agent, and the amount of suspicious shit that went on with Robert F. Kennedy's assassination. Last podcast on the left did a series on the JFK assassination. They said at the end that their theory is that the Secret Service agents were hungover and tired from the night before, so when Oswald shot one of the agents holding a rifle, jumped her and accidentally discharged his rifle, killing JFK. Then the Secret Service couldn't have it getting out that they fucked up and killed the president, so they covered it up. The term conspiracy theorist is used by the people in power to ridicule and mock the people who look too closely into the suspicious things the government does in order to discredit them. That way, when a conspiracy theorist actually finds the truth, no one would believe them because they're a crazy, tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. Stargate SG-1's 100th episode actually made use of this. Why would they let an alien make a ridiculous TV show based on the SGC? Plausible deniability. After it aired, should any further leaks occur, they could always paint the would-be whistleblower as just riffing off the TV show and discredit them that way. Also, remember the evil overlord list. I will see to it that plucky young lasses in strange clothes and with the accent of an outlander shall regularly climb some monument in the main square of my capital and denounce me, claim to know the secret of my power, rally the masses to rebellion, etc. That way, the citizens will be jaded in case the real thing ever comes along. Peter and Spock, www.eviloverlord.com. Edit, try this one, http://www.eviloverlord.com/list/overlord.html. To be fair, they do sound crazy when you explain them. I find the problem is I have to rely on no. It's true, I read it on the internet and then search some stuff up that doesn't look any more trustworthy than some of the anti-science propaganda I have seen get promoted around the internet. If it's that crazy, it's hard to believe whether true or not. Just to add to this one, I also think that from the 90s onwards there was a considerable uptick in Hollywood movies that portray a government conspiracy, therefore pushing conspiracy theories further and further into the realm of fiction. Wanna put forward your thoughts on government surveillance/corruption/abuses of power? You watch too many movies. I think it's possible but unlikely. Before 9/11 it was pretty uncommon for the Air Force to carry weapons within the US. There are actually interviews with Air Force pilots saying they were scrambled unarmed and any aircraft that were already in the air almost certainly were not armed. Being after the first two attacks, it's definitely possible that an armed aircraft could be diverted toward Flight 93 or an aircraft could have been loaded and sent up. But I don't think it would be likely, as this scenario at the time was unthinkable and not something crews would be prepared for. Either way, even if it was shot down, it really makes no difference, and I would rather remember the heroic passengers for what they did. Truth or not, either way they still gave their lives to protect those on the ground. Our smartphones are spying on us. I used to go as far as to stick my nose up at people who didn't own smartphones because they felt like they were being spied on. I thought it was the most ridiculous, delusional thing ever. That was before I started frequently getting ads for products that I had never purchased or ever looked up online, but had recently spoken about with someone. Just the other day I was talking to someone about how I hadn't eaten it in years, but I remember loving President's Choice white cheddar macaroni and cheese as a child, and then literally right after that getting ads for it, when I had never searched anything remotely close to it, or seen any ads for it. This happens to me frequently. Extremely creepy shit that's almost not even a conspiracy anymore. Everyone has experienced this and somehow we're not talking about it more. Same incident but different theory. I think the crash was actually caused during testing of secret German technology taken by the US during the late stages of World War II and was quickly covered up to not alert the USSR of what they possessed. Near the end of the war, the Allies captured a ton of technology. Scientists and engineers from the war-wrecked Third Reich, the Soviets and other allies raced to capture the most valuable assets to come out on top after the war. Much of the equipment was pretty high-tech at the time, such as the Me-262, the first operational fighter jet, the STG-44, the first assault rifle, and the V-2 rocket. Many of the Nazis brought over, like Wernher von Braun and Kurt H. Debus, were major players in the US space program and got America to the moon. I think that after the war the US began testing some really high-tech materials and equipment and it was afraid of the Soviets finding out about some of the really exotic stuff it possessed, so naturally it chose New Mexico as the testing ground. Maybe it was something as tame as a V-2 rocket or a Me-262. Or perhaps it was a new project that was created by some of the scientists captured during Operation Paperclip that was absolutely top secret and would alert the Russians to what they truly had. Oh, and the alien bodies were burnt chimp corpses. I wish more people would actually give their opinion, rather than just post popular movie and move on. Knowing that a person doesn't like popular movie isn't interesting. Knowing why they don't like popular movie is why I clicked on the thread. For me, Unbreakable, it's an interesting concept, but there's a quality to it that makes me think student film. There were just a lot of distracting choices, like scenes shot at unusual angles or character actions that didn't really seem to fit, that felt to me like an amateur director trying things out to see how they worked, rather than a polished, finished product.